saying the shooting is ongoing. Plenty more on that.
Tonight, the worst wildfire disaster in 80 years. 19 firefighters are dead, and the fire rages on.
I think what we're most concerned about is how painful these losses are.
John Blackstone on how it happened. Carter Evans with the mother of one of the men who were lost.
He wanted to be a firefighter hotshot all of his life.
Time is running out on Egypt's first democratically elected president as the military makes a threat. Clarissa Ward is in the middle of it. And 150 years ago today, the battle that saved America. Chip Reed returns to Gettysburg.
This is the CBS Evening News with Scott Pelley.
Good evening. 19 of the nation's best firefighters were overwhelmed late yesterday as they defended the town of Yarnell, Arizona. The unit, known as the Granite Mountain Hotshots, was wiped out, except for one lone survivor. The Yarnell fire has incinerated more than 200 homes in a town of 700 people northwest of Phoenix. These are pictures of the Granite Mountain Hotshots in May last year. Hotshots are elite teams that meet arduous training and fitness standards, the equivalent of wildfire SWAT teams. This is Chris McKenzie, one of the Granite Mountain men who was killed. His father was a firefighter too. In Prescott, mourners, including Toby Schultz, created a makeshift memorial on the fence line of the Hotshots fire station. We have two correspondents on this story. First, John Blackstone in Congress, Arizona, for us tonight. John?
Scott, this fire has now burned across 13 square miles in these mountains. 400 firefighters are battling it in windy, sweltering conditions. It's the deadliest wildfire ever in Arizona. The bodies of the 19 hotshots were carried off the mountain today in a procession of vans, saluted by other firefighters as they passed. It's not clear what they were doing when the fire swept over them on a rocky ridge outside Yarnell. But at 4 p.m. Sunday, commanders lost contact with the team. The flames had just unexpectedly changed direction. Sage Visserling saw the fire turn and take his house.
It was just one tragic event to the next, and when that cloud, that wind changed, it turned into like a tornado of fire instantly.
This video from 2012 shows the hotshots training in the use of their fire shelters. The small fire-resistant tents offer last-ditch protection from flames and smoke. Some of the firefighters were found in their shelters, others outside. The lone survivor of the team was away from the group, moving vehicles into position. The fire here is being driven by temperatures over 100 degrees and erratic wind gusts over 40 miles an hour. It is burning through an area that has not had a fire since 1967. Incident Commander Roy Hall.
Anytime we get these kind of fuels, the brush, the oak and the manzanita brush that is in excess of 40 years, it's explosive and it is a killer. Dangerous.
The Granite Mountain Hotshots are among the most elite in the nation. These pictures were taken in May 2012 as they battled a fire in New Mexico. Yesterday, they were on home turf, protecting their neighbors. The fire burned across Gordon Acree's land that minutes earlier had seemed safe.
There was a lot of residents observing the fire, and oh man, it would just break your heart, you know, see everybody watching their I can't, you know, I see them losing all their stuff and they're standing there. It's just, wow.
As fire crews continue their battle, investigators are on the mountain searching for answers. They're trying to discover, Scott, how some of the nation's best firefighters could have been caught with no means of escape.
John, thank you. Late today, we got the names of the 19. They range in age from 21 to 43. 14 of them are in their 20s. At least 2 are sons of firemen. The governor of Arizona said the loss of these men is, quote, one of our darkest and most devastating days. President Obama said today simply, we are heartbroken. Carter Evans spoke with the mother of one of the men who was lost, Andrew Ashcraft.
I have nicknames for my children, and Andrew was my treasure.
Deborah Finkston's son, Andrew Ashcraft, was 29 years old and a father of 4.
He wanted to be a firefighter hotshot all of his life.
He lived it.
Oh, he breathed it.
Ashcraft joined the Granite Mountain Hotshots in 2011.
Andrew would leave his wife and children to go battle fire to help others. And they're gone for 21 days. It's almost like a deployment in the military.
The Hotshots had just returned from fighting fires in New Mexico and nearby in Arizona when they were sent right back out to fight the Yarnell fire. Ashcraft texted his wife Julianne that it had become incredibly intense, but he still wasn't worried. Julianne responded with pictures of the kids at the pool.
And he had texted back, "Wow, I wish I was with you guys."
And that's the last you heard?
Yeah.
What do you know about those final moments?
I know that their tents were deployed, their fire tents, their shelters.
So they deployed those shelters.
And some were in and some were not.
What does that tell you?
That they went by what they left. That my son was probably burned. That I know. Last night I laid in bed, I could hear his voice in his little sarcastic tone. "Mom, I'm okay. We'll be okay." And I said, "Thank you, Andrew, for letting me know."
Scott, conditions last night were too dangerous for investigators to recover the bodies, but we're told a team of firefighters remained there overnight to protect the scene and watch over their fallen brothers.
Carter, you've covered a lot of these fires with these crews in the past. What are these fire shelters supposed to do, and how's it all supposed to work?
Well, these fire shelters, firefighters are trained to deploy them within 30 seconds or less, and then they're supposed to keep their nose and mouth right up against the dirt. That's where the most oxygen is. But keep in mind, these fire shelters are supposed to be an absolute last resort. They do save lives, but Scott, it is not a guarantee.
Carter Evans, thank you, Carter. Wildfires are burning hotter than they have in years and are covering more ground than they have before. We saw that on assignment for 60 Minutes when we went to Idaho with one of the federal government's most experienced men, Tom Boatner. We joined up with Tom Boatner, who, after 30 years on the fire line, became Chief of Fire Operations for the federal government.
A fire of this size and this intensity in this country would have been extremely rare 15, 20 years ago. They're commonplace these days.
10 years ago, a big fire was what?
10 years ago, if you had a 100,000-acre fire, you were talking about a huge fire. And if we had 1 or 2 of those a year, that was probably unusual. Now we talk about 200,000-acre fires like it's just another day at the office. It's been a huge change.
You know what? It's hotter than hell right here.
It's getting pretty damn hot.
Whoa, it is amazing.
So you can see, you can imagine the challenge for young men and women with hand tools like this to come up here and try to put out a fire like this.
We wondered whether Boatner thought one of the factors might be climate change.
You know, there are a lot of people who don't believe in climate change.
You won't find them on the fire line in the American West anymore because we've had climate change beat into us over the last 10 or 15 years. We know what we're seeing, and we're dealing with a period of climate in terms of temperature and humidity and drought that's different than anything people have seen in our lifetimes.
And there's no let-up in that hot, dry weather fueling these fires. A big portion of the West is broiling with near-record temperatures. Forecasters say the triple-digit heat won't break for days. In Egypt, the army today gave President Mohamed Morsi 48 hours to resolve a growing crisis, or the army said it will step in. The situation is so serious that General Martin Dempsey, the top U.S. military officer, called his Egyptian counterpart today. Protests had been building for weeks against Morsi, who became Egypt's first freely elected leader just a year ago. Hundreds of thousands have taken to the streets. So have Morsi's supporters. And Clarissa Ward is in Cairo.
The ultimatum came as army helicopters flying Egyptian flags circled overhead, prompting roars of approval from the hundreds of thousands of protesters in Tahrir Square. The protesters blame President Morsi and his main backers, the Muslim Brotherhood, for mismanaging the economy and for the breakdown of security. Step down, they chanted. Muslim Brotherhood spokesman Gihad al-Haddad told us that Morsi inherited Egypt's troubles from former President Hosni Mubarak.
If you get a Formula One racer into a car with 4 flat tires, no steering wheel, and an empty tank, it's not going to drive. It needs to be fixed first.
It was Morsi's one-year anniversary that prompted the mass protests. Demonstrators claim Morsi has rewarded his Muslim Brotherhood supporters with key positions of power. 16 people were killed in clashes in the last 24 hours, the majority in an attack on the Muslim Brotherhood's headquarters. An American student was killed in earlier violence on Friday.
Protesters were pelting this building with Molotov cocktails all night. You can still see some small fires are burning, and they've covered the walls with graffiti of what has really become the rallying cry of this anti-Morsi movement, Irhal, leave.
With the army's ultimatum, Morsi's supporters are bracing themselves for a battle to defend their president, who they say has a right to finish his term.
If he has 4 years, he either proves he can do it or he can't. If he can't, the people are going to choose someone else.
Clarissa Ward is joining us amid the sound of the crowd and fireworks in Tahrir Square this evening. Clarissa, what happens next?
Well, Scott, the Army is insisting that it is not planning a military coup, that it just wants to get both sides to agree on a political solution out of this crisis. But the opposition has already said that it will not meet with President Morsi, which really doesn't leave the president many options to get himself out of this quagmire. And certainly this crowd behind me will only be satisfied by one result, which is his resignation.
Momentous times in Egypt. Clarissa, thanks very much. Today, Edward Snowden asked Russia and 14 other countries for asylum. Snowden is the former National Security Agency computer technician charged with espionage for exposing 2 top-secret U.S. surveillance programs. He's holed up at the Moscow airport. Russian President Vladimir Putin said today that Snowden can stay in Russia if he stops giving away American secrets, which Putin admitted sounded strange coming from him. There was no explanation. Late today, Snowden put out a statement criticizing President Obama, saying, now it is being reported that after promising not to do so, the president ordered his vice president to pressure the leaders of nations from which I have requested protection to deny my asylum petitions. Thousands of pages documenting abuse by Catholic priests have been released. The jury here's George Zimmerman's first interview with police after he shot and killed Trayvon Martin. And the stars are falling at Wimbledon when the CBS Evening News continues.
A great night's sleep guaranteed.
We learned today that sex abuse by priests in Milwaukee went on for years and that top church officials knew it. The documents released today also reveal that the Archbishop tried to move millions of dollars to protect church money during the scandal. Dean Reynolds spoke to one of the abuse victims.
What grade were you in?
I was in 2nd grade. I was 7 years old.
It was at the St. John Vianney School near Milwaukee in 1977 that Cub Scout John Pillmeyer was fondled by the man standing behind him in this photo, his parish priest, David Hanser.
The priest came into the room and said he wanted a volunteer to help him with some project. And so I raised my hand and he took me out of class and abused me.
The Hanser case is one of 45 involving sexual abuse by priests, detailed in the thousands of pages released by the Archdiocese of Milwaukee today. The files also document financial maneuvering by the church as lawsuits mounted. There was this 2007 request, for example, by then Archbishop Timothy Dolan to shift $57 million to a trust fund just as the Archdiocese was preparing for bankruptcy. The move, sanctioned by the Vatican, was to provide what Dolan, now the Cardinal of New York, called an improved protection for these funds from any legal claim and liability. Jeff Anderson, an attorney for victims of abuse, said Dolan's motive was obvious.
To avoid having to pay the claims that they knew they were going to be responsible for having covered up sexual abuse.
In a statement today, Dolan dismissed such charges as old and discredited attacks. And the files also include this 2003 letter from Dolan to the future Pope Benedict XVI, in which he argues for the dismissal of an abusive priest. And Scott, the letter included a warning from Dolan in which he wrote, "As victims organize and become more public, the potential for true scandal is very real."
Dean, thank you very much. As you heard in Dean's story, he mentioned a priest, David Hanser, accused of abuse. We contacted Hanser. He declined to speak with us. In another scandal, the director of the Vatican Bank and his deputy resigned today. This follows the arrest last week of a bank accountant who is accused of plotting to smuggle $26 million into Italy from Switzerland. Pope Francis has set up a commission to investigate the bank. What happened to all the favorites at Wimbledon? That's just ahead.
This is Sky News. Our top stories. Scientists in Britain are developing a test that will greatly increase the chances of identifying women at risk of suffering postnatal depression. A foreign ministry official in Moscow says former U.S. intelligence analyst Edward Snowden has applied for asylum in Russia. And Egypt's foreign minister has resigned as the country's army gives politicians 48 hours to meet the demands of the people.
Come a long way, baby.
There's something about being in a classroom with like-minded people. This is Stephen. He's my tutor at college.
I'm not about to fall in love with you, Jan. I've already fallen.
Starlings, the brand new series, starts Tuesday at 9, Sky 1 HD, or watch it on demand.
Today, jurors at George Zimmerman's murder trial heard recordings of his first police interview after he shot teenager Trayvon Martin. Zimmerman, a neighborhood watch volunteer, said he was driving on a rainy night when he first spotted Martin, saying, "These guys always get away." Later, he told police that Martin jumped him. The cost for loans for college students doubled today from 3.4% to 6.8%. That's because Congress could not agree on a plan to keep the old interest rate. But lawmakers could roll it back when Congress reconvenes next week. There has been yet another huge upset at Wimbledon. Serena Williams, the top seed and defending champ, lost today to Sabine Lisicki of Germany in the fourth round. It's the first time that she has lost in 34 matches. A lot of stars are out at Wimbledon. Roger Federer, Rafael Nadal, and Maria Sharapova have all lost in the early rounds. 70 years ago, America underwent a trial by fire. We'll remember the turning point of the Civil War next.
Many are considered, but few are chosen. You have an awesome responsibility. To win for the Lions is the ultimate. The moment's arriving for the greatest game of your lives. This is your Everest, boys.
The third test, the decider.
Gunfire echoed yesterday through the fields of Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, as history buffs recreated the turning point of the Civil War. The Battle of Gettysburg broke out 150 years ago today. It was the battle in which the Union defeated Lee's last invasion of the North. In 3 days, 51,000 soldiers were dead, wounded, or missing, nearly evenly split between the two sides. For some Americans, the battle is as present as yesterday, and Chip Reed met one of them.
And this is just day one at Gettysburg.
Gary Roach has been a battlefield guide at Gettysburg for 18 years.
I can get very emotional here.
Emotional because for Roach, Gettysburg is personal. His tour focuses on the experiences of one man, his great-great-grandfather.
Not only one soldier, but his family, how he's rippled through time, how he will be honored because he is a true American hero.
Sergeant Patrick DeLacy served in the Pennsylvania 143rd Infantry.
So your great-great-grandfather was right there firing at the rebels coming across in Pickett's charge.
On this very ground that we're standing on.
Pickett's charge was the decisive battle of Gettysburg with an estimated 6,000 killed and injured. It was a devastating defeat for the Confederate Army.
You went through a lot of your life knowing almost nothing about Gettysburg and your ancestor who fought here. What changed that?
It was a birthday gift from my lovely wife in my 40s. And I came to Gettysburg for 3 days and had that epiphany where, wow, not only does my ancestor leave a detailed record, which I had, of what he did here, okay, but I had the Medal of Honor that he was awarded a year later in the Civil War.
Roach's great-great-grandfather lived to be 79 years old. Shortly before he died, he wrote about his experience at Gettysburg in the Scranton Truth.
We are trooping along and sweltering.
Now, Roach reads his ancestors' words to battlefield visitors.
And when Company A gets the order to deploy in a skirmish array, the boys of that company raise a cheer and rush down the slope to Willoughby Run.
Cordelia Peters and her family expected a history lesson, but they got so much more.
It was very unreal.
It made you emotional?
Yes, it did.
Why?
To know how much went on.
Do you find it moving every time you walk onto this battlefield after all these years?
Absolutely. I promised myself when I got the license that if ever it became a job, I would walk away. Every visitor I take out gets the exact same enthusiasm and the same tour. Where my ancestors...
150 years later, Gary Roach is giving new meaning to the words of Abraham Lincoln, that those who gave the last full measure of devotion here shall not have died in vain. Chip Reed, CBS News, Gettysburg.
And that's the CBS Evening News for tonight. For all of us at CBS News all around the world, good night.
Closed captioning is proudly sponsored by Citracal.
A calcium chew this decadent and sugar-free? New Citracal sugar-free chocolate chews, giving you calcium plus D in a tasty little package.